So, hello everybody. I'm Francesco Fanicchi, brand communication director here at Powersoft. And welcome to our live sound webinar sessions. And let me say that this session will cover Powersoft-driven SuperWedge, which has been specially developed for the Red Hot Chilli Peppers tour, and will be led by Dave Rat, who will answer your questions after the pre-recorded video interview we made in Bologna a few weeks ago. So I'm very happy to welcome industry expert Dave. Ciao Dave, thanks. Really appreciate your time on this. And I know you are busy with the tour in Amsterdam right now, and hope everything is good there. Okay. Okay. Do you want to add something before let the video play, or do you want just answer a question after the video? Say hello to someone.
Hello. Let's talk about some sound stuff, and we'll watch the video, and yeah, hopefully we got some good questions, and I can be of assistance.
Yeah, you cool. So let me say that give you some instruction for maybe that this instruction will help you to join the webinar. And first of all, please disable your microphone, webcam, and don't stop the video playing. The video is 20 minutes long, so take your time. During the video, you can ask questions by forwarding your chat messages to question bot. You can find question bot by browsing through the drop down menu located in the window chat on your control panel. As said, after the video, they will go back live and answer all your questions. Probably, I hope not, but for reasons of time, we cannot answer all the questions. So we will fill all those we received, and we will provide with them via mail by mail. So see you later, and enjoy the video.
Hey, I'm Dave Rat, and here in Bologna, Italy, I'm the sound engineer for Red Hot Chilli Peppers. Going to talk about some sound stuff. We're on tour about 4 months into probably a couple years left of traveling around the world here. Things have been going great. We've got a pretty good sized system we're traveling with. I got my big analog board, which I love, and a bunch of Powersoft amps. This is the debut tour of the SuperWedge, which I've been working on for quite some time. It's a double 12, 10, 2-inch wedge. Really excited about it. Tried to design the loudest wedge that's ever been made. The concept behind the SuperWedge was we were looking for something that was extremely loud. What would be the perfect wedge? What are the problems that we're having with the existing monitor systems? And I've been working on it for quite a while, building tri-amp wedges since the late 80s. The micro wedge system, which was going to coax in order to unify the point source. And the SuperWedge was kind of is a combination of all the concepts I've been working on. I took the tri-amp idea of the old Rat wedge, double 15, 10, 2, and combined that with the coaxial concept of the micro wedge, and then added in another dimension of powering each speaker off of its own amplifier with its own potential send to it. So the wedge can be configured in multiple ways. For example, one setting would be a double 12, 10, 2-inch tri-amp. Another one would have one of the 12s go from 40 hertz to 80 hertz, and the other 12 would go 40 hertz to 250 hertz. That way there's not an interference between the two 12-inch drivers between 80 and 250, which causes beaming, and you get a wider coverage and some low frequency extension. Another setup is to have a 12, 10, 2 tri-amp wedge running the 12-10-2 Triamp, one of the 12s, and the coaxial 10-2, and then have the second 12 on an aux send, either as a subwoofer or a full range guitar or a full range bass. And that can be driven by a separate input on the Powersoft amplifier. So these multiple configurations, and some of them don't even require new presets. You can have input 1 of the amplifier drives it as a 4-way wedge with a low, mid, and then a mid and high. And input 2 drives just the 12-10-2, and input 3 drives just the subwoofer 12. And so just by which input you select, you have the ability to alter the configuration of the wedge. For what we're doing here on Josh's stuff, we've got actually 2 of the 12s pulled out and Celestion 12s replaced into the wedge. So it's a 12-10-2, and then the 2 Celestion 12s are driven off of an emulator out of the guitar rig into the monitors and run pure guitar. So he's got guitar coming out of a completely different physical location than the vocals and the rest of the instruments. That improves clarity, reduces intermodulation distortion on the guitar sound, and it sounds like, he said it's the first time it's ever sounded like his guitar coming out of a wedge. Josh was one of the inspirations. I mean, he was unhappy with his guitar sound. You know, why can't the wedges just sound like my guitar, he said once. I was like, well, maybe they can, and the SuperWedge was an endeavor to try and solve that. SuperWedge is built with custom 18 sound components. We had them build up some drivers, most notably the mid-high driver, which I have a 4-inch, I'm using a 4-inch beryllium diaphragm compression driver, which is unusual. Most of the stuff people are calling 2 inches now, 2-inch drivers, are actually 3-inch diaphragm with a 1.3, 1.4, 1.5-inch exit. This is a full-size 4-inch diaphragm like we used to have in the old days with the big JBL drivers, with a beryllium diaphragm, so it's got the high-frequency extension, but the size of it gives it a tremendous amount of output. In order to get this full-size compression driver radiating out through the middle of a coaxial 10, we needed to increase the voice coil size of the 10, so I had them build a custom designed 10 that's got a 4-inch voice coil as well, instead of a common 3 or 2.5 inch, which gives the room for that to come down the center of the coax. And then the coaxial horn that's mounted in there, we actually drew them up, built them on 3D printers, and those are unique as well. There's some aspects to it which I won't share, but the ability of that to, first of all, it's an asymmetrical output, it's a 50 by 70, and it's rotatable, so you can unscrew some screws and remount it if you want wide or narrow. And I've done some design work to make it extremely low resonance for the chamber behind the horn and in front of the 10, and found quite exciting, effective new solution there. The wedge is extremely small. If you look at it, it looks like a coffin, and it's shaved on all the sides, so the 12s actually nestle up into the corners, minimizing the overall size. It's actually 2 12s, you'd want a wedge that's typically would be at least 2 to 3 inches wider. This thing's only 25 inches wide, 25 and a half inches wide for 24 and a half inches of 12-inch driver. Ports out onto the floor, got floor coupling on the ports, gives additional output. Both 12s are individually chambered so that you can send different signals, they don't interfere. The 10 is obviously individually chambered in this cool little octagonal chamber for it. And there's 6 connectors on it. There's 2 in the ports, so if you want the cables hidden. There's 2 on the back that allow you to set it and connect them in the tail end. And then they can be rotated up into a 90-degree position, put on top of a sub and used for side fills. And there's a set of connectors in the back as well that allow those to be in an optimum spot. The goal of the SuperWedge was to design the clearest, loudest monitor wedge ever made. When I look at when I design a speaker cabinet or I look at other people's designs, I look at them as a series of parameters. You can almost determine what they had in mind. The parameters are size, weight, cost, fidelity, maximum volume, and ergonomics, or visual aspects. And if you look at those 6 parameters, you can look at just about anything and see what order they've put those in. If you look at, I don't know, I hate to say manufacturer, but you can find low cost, where you found something that's inexpensive, is their #1 goal, and then they try and make it sound good, and then but it's kind of big and it's kind of heavy and it doesn't look pretty. Or you find something that's absolutely beautiful, but it's really, really heavy. You see turntables like that. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're really heavy, but weight is not an issue. It's an asset for turntables. You look at speaker designs. Maybe they get extremely loud. It's a big horn-loaded system. Doesn't sound very good, and it's big and it's heavy. Or you find something really small, like a little portable speaker. It sounds good, and it's not heavy, and it's small, but it doesn't get very loud, and it costs a lot of money. So you're always balancing these factors to come up with an outcome. Keeping those clear in your mind as you're going through the design process is crucial. So for the SuperWedge, the parameters that I was looking at are fidelity is #1, #2, maximum volume, #3, minimum size, #4, beauty, and #5, weight. Now what I've done is, and then cost was off the list. We'll deal with that later. So then I took those, then you maximize. What's the best sounding thing going to be? Double 12, 10, 2-inch, tri-amped, multiple drivers, breaking up the bandwidth, and using the beryllium diaphragm, large 4-inch coax. So I really pushed the fidelity aspect to the highest limit that I could. Maximum volume ties into that by using multiple ways and large diaphragms, having a lot of energy available to be irradiated from the compression driver. Take some weight off the 10, take some weight off the 12s. Having it tri-amp to reduce intermodulation distortion, not running the 12s all the way up to the horn and losing that mid-range clarity. Then I pushed into weight, went with all neo all the way around, and then finally size, tried to minimize. So now I've got this piece. What am I going to power it with? I need an amp that has the ability to deliver a tremendous amount of power, but it's quad amped, so it has to be small, and the same design parameters apply to amplifier manufacturing. I want something that sounds great, is extremely small, gets very, very loud. The design process for the Wedge actually existed for quite a while, and while I was in the design process, Powersoft released the X4 amplifier. Not only was it small and a tremendous amount of output power, but it had the matrixing capability, which allowed me to have these multiple inputs, and it's the only amp out there that met that was even close to meeting all the requirements and taking it even further with the matrixing. Originally, the SuperWedge design, I was going to have 7 presets. One for double 12, 10, 2-inch tri-amped, another one with the 4-way, another one for a guitar player, another one for a bass player, another one subs on an aux send, another one with the 10-2 emulating a micro wedge, and then both 12 subs on an aux, and so on. With the matrixing capability of the X4 and X8 amp, I'm able to have multiple inputs and combine that down to what I believe will be 3 presets. And by using different inputs, you'll be able to achieve all of those capabilities and configurations. The other aspect is the size. We wanted to, with a conventional 2-rack space amp, if you have 1 amp per wedge, you can run into a lot of amps really quickly. It gets expensive, but also it gets big. Cost was not a major consideration, but size is. Being able to have this thing portable is crucial. While designing the SuperWedge, we've got the basic design together. I'm working with Mario. I'm testing the wedge. We're trying to get more out of it. Now that we've got it working and sounding good, we're trying to push it to its limits of maximum capabilities. In order to do that, it's really important to have a high quality limiter and protection set inside of a amplifier or whatever product you're using to protect the wedges. There was actually an update that came through which increased from 3 different limiting capabilities to 5 for the X4 series and X8 series. And that additional capability, the ability to have frequency dependent limiting, the ability to have the trigger for the limiting based on an EQ, have an EQ in the trigger circuit, was a game changer. That brought the wedge up to, when we were already loud, we've already proven that there's no competing product that we were able to get our hands on that could even get close to the volume levels and fidelity of the SuperWedge. And then we got these new limiters and it was just like a whole nother step. We were able to get even more clarity and volume out than I even imagined. I was already happy and then I just got happier. SuperWedges for the stage set for Chili Peppers and brought in the X4 amplifiers. The idea came up to continue to use X4s for everything. And that came in really handy. We actually have the X4s driving the entire monitor rig on stage. And having a single amplifier solution that's then able to kind of morph itself into the capabilities of driving other manufacturers' products, some prototype stuff, prototype sub that I have out there, the drum thumpers, old vintage Rat wedges that we created settings for. Yeah, it's just been extremely useful to have a single product there. Every amplifier we have on this tour has all the settings for every possibility that it could be applied to on this tour. So we can take any amp and replace any other one and come up with a preset. So we don't need a bunch of different spares. All right, well that pretty much sums up the basics there. I'm gonna wander up on stage and go say hi to Mark Vanderwall. He's the monitor engineer for the Chili Peppers. He was instrumental in getting bringing a lot of the Powersoft stuff out here and embracing. When I came out to the tour, I brought into rehearsals a SuperWedge, brought him in, showed it to him. Hey, what do you think of these? But ultimately, he's the monitor engineer and makes a decision. And he put him on Josh, and it ended up working out well. And then he put him on Flea, and then he put him on Chad, and then he took my other one from out front there. So we'll say hi to Mark, and he'll give you more about the stage setup.
All right, so let me start out by showing you the layout of the amps, what I'm using them for, and what type of routing is going into those. So the first mix we have here, the first 2 amplifiers are actually a stereo pair of wedges for Josh, the guitar player, who does not wear ears. So he's the one who tends to be one of the more critical on stage as far as having the wedges. What I want to do is give him a stereo mix so he gets a nice stereo field of image up there. And so what we're doing with these current amps is I'm actually sending, and with the SuperWedge, we have each SuperWedge is running 3-way on one input, and then it also has a Celestion 12-inch guitar speaker in it that we run off one input and one output. So I'm using all 4 channels of the amp to do that, each left and right. And then, so that's the first 2 amps. So now what he gets is he gets the smoothness of the guitar without going through a horn. And he gets that separated, and I still have a 3-way wedge left over inside there that we can achieve all the vocals, drums, and everything else he needs in his mix. The third amp down here is Flea, staged right, and he's the bassist. So basically I have a backup. Flea is on here, but we have a full mix in here backed up and just brought down a little bit on stage. And then when it comes time, if he were to have any issues with his ears and need to take them out, I can just boot up the mix a little bit and go from there. This particular one is running 3-way, and I'm running the 212s and the SuperWedges basically as two low end. And so 1 amp here is taking care of 2 SuperWedges. So in these 3 amps, I'm taking care of 4 SuperWedges on 3 different mixes, routing actually 5 different routes into it if you consider the guitar And going back to the guitar input, what I do is we take two inputs up from a guitar emulator, a left and right input, and I feed those left and right respectively into the guitar input for the Celestion on the SuperWedge for Josh. Then, as I move over to here, I run Anthony Kiedis, our singer. He runs a pair of Dave's old L wedges, which probably are nearing 30 years, if not older, but they work fine. They're a double woofer with a mid-range and a horn in them. And basically what we did is Dave came up with a little custom program for this, a three-way program. And so we're running this with a single input. He has a pair of wedges up there. We're running with a single input, but powering two wedges. And that's all done through this particular amp. The next amp we have is powering the drum fill, which is two more SuperWedges running three-way. And those are basically, it's a mono mix. And I keep those, that's for Chad the drummer, a pair of wedges. If he were to have a problem with his ears, I can just instantly boot those up. Occasionally he'll come in and practice or rehearse, and he doesn't want to wear his ears, so I'll just turn the mix on. It's worked out really good. It's a nice solid box for doing the drum kit. And from there, I run to, I've got a routing here with an amp that has a single input, actually double input, two inputs. One of them runs the drum sub, which is a Dave Super Sub, a 21-inch single front-loaded subwoofer. And then it's also running two of the Drum Kicker 2 drum thumpers. So from there, I take an input for the sub, and that feeds out one channel. And then the thumpers, I'm actually firing two channels worth, one channel to each drum thumper. So I've got plenty of power going to all those three things, and I have different input and output controls than I can have over those particular transducers. Then we can move down here, which are my side fills, which are the Acoustics arcs. Basically, I'm running two aside, on their side, horns apart for a wider spread on stage, and a low profile for sightlines. Basically, this is a two input, left and right, stage left and stage right. See separate inputs. And it's running a two-way output. So I'm running the arcs on there are being run by amp currently. So basically we have two for stage left, and then a high and a low for stage right. So we get to the next amp in line here. Basically I have this amp set up to take care of a lot of the micro wedges, which are the AW micro wedge, and I'm using the MW12s currently. And I have this particular one set up actually in passive mode. I've ran them both in biamp and both in passive, and I found I don't have a giant difference or a preference to run one either way. So I ended up deciding to run these. This sees 4 inputs with 4 outputs, and I can run 4 different micro wedge inputs or outputs from this one amp. And I found that I wanted the flexibility without having to add more amplifiers. I get plenty of volume out of them just in passive mode, and so therefore this has given me 2 more outputs than if I was running biamp. Now the last amp we come to is, which was originally a spare amp, is now running Josh. We were having such good luck with Josh's stereo pair up front that we ended up using another single SuperWedge near the drum riser for him, because he spends a lot of time interacting with Chad the drummer as he plays during the night. So we started with the micro wedge, which was one of these passive mixes, and as he got used to the sound of the SuperWedge, we realized the micro wedge was not up to the same capabilities as the SuperWedge. So we replaced it with the SuperWedge, and I run this the same way as we run his other pair, where we have one input that feeds just a Celestion, a guitar 12-inch speaker, and then the rest of the 3-way box is running off an input for a mix. Therefore, I've got 3 amps running SuperWedges that all use a guitar input and a mix input. And so we end up using all 4 channels of the amp just for that. Jumping back to the micro wedge, in the passive, basically I'm running a Q. I'm running we have one song where we have a secondary bass player that comes up and plays, and I have a little a micro wedge for him, just for a quick mix for him on stage. And I have 2 open channels. Basically I have either a biamp spare right now, or I have 2 passive channels, a micro wedge, which I carry spare micro wedges just in case I ever need to throw something up around the stage for anything that pops up. And that pretty much is what how I'm using the X4s. And like I say, it's a lot of power in a small space. It's made for a great little setup for me to be able to move around the world here with, and not have a lot of excess racks and extra wiring and different gear to have to interface together from different racks. And so here you have what we came up with for this particular run, and I really, at this point in time, don't foresee having to add anything to this to finish out the run. Should I always have room to add some stuff here where we're running some rechargeable batteries. We've mounted the preamp for the vocals in here. We also have this neat little thing which we're not currently using, but we leave open as an option for Josh, the guitar player. Basically, Dave has made a patch pass-through box here, where if, as I mentioned before, we're running an emulator out of my board to these guitar speakers that are in the SuperWedges. But what this little box patch panel here is capable of doing is actually taking a line from an actual guitar head, a tube head, a solid state head, whatever he wants to do. He could send me speaker level into this, and I can send it on to the selection that would be in the SuperWedge. As of now, we haven't used that. We've been real happy with just passing the emulator through, and but we should always retain the option here that if he were to change and want to try driving that 12-inch directly from his amp, he's able to do it. And with that, I guess maybe we'll take a look at the stage. All right, first up, we've got Josh's stereo pair here. We've got a left and a right. And basically on his, we've taken the 12 that is on the upstage side of each wedge, and this is which one is gonna have the guitar speaker in it. So the other 12 and the horn in the mid-range are all firing like a 3-way. So on this side, it would be this one. So basically, we can kind of wrap the guitar sound around them and wrap the wedge around them. I go for a real wide spread on his wedges because he really likes the wide stereo imagery. What we have here is one of Dave Rat's first versions of wedges, first generation L wedge with 2 15s, a mid-range and a horn. Basically, this makes a good vocal backup for Anthony, who's on here. So we don't really drive this, but it is being driven all by 1 amp, both speakers. Then after that, we're going to move over to Fleas. Basically, it's a mono mix, a little tighter setup on the pair, and it's running a full mix through it on a 3-way setting on the X4. And from there, we're going to run to it. We can't really, now we have a passive micro wedge MW12 just for a quick mix for 1 song, for 1 player. And from there, we'll move on to the drum kit. So here, aside from Josh, now we're at the drum kit, but aside from Josh, this is probably the biggest use of our X4s right now. The 1 channel that's running the Dave Super Sub here. We've got 3 channels running the Super Wedges here in mono. And then we have 2 channels running on the Butt Kicker 2 drum thumpers. And so in this particular setup here, we're using, achieving all this in 2 amplifiers and 2 rack spaces. Then to complement Josh's use of the SuperWedge downstage, we've also added one for him upstage here, where he has a vocal position when he likes to interact with Chad the drummer. And from there, it really kind of rounds out the use of the X4s and the SuperWedges and some super new products from these guys. Thanks. Let's move back on. All right, just one more thing I wanted to show you of how we've gotten used to using the X4 here is that the as you notice, or probably have noticed in looking at the amp, there's not an LED or LCD screen on it to show you what it's doing and everything. What we did is spend a couple days in rehearsal, literally with a computer and just setting up the programs the way we wanted it. Very simple to use, the interface. I can hook up to this whole setup in a matter of minutes and have control of anything or all of them if I choose. One of the great things about it is I find I don't need the screen because I know what's in these amps. We can check them occasionally, but I've had great success with and no failures with how these are operating. So I've been very confident in the mode every day of just coming in, powering these on, and you know, I can do the one click to do the mutes, and powering off. I power these on and power them off. I probably cycled these amps 30, 40 times without ever looking at the computer. And I've never had an issue with something not coming up right. And you know, so for those of you who may have noticed that and wondered, you know, in this day and age, how come it's not sending, just flashing information to you? I see everything I need to see right from the colored buttons we see here. I can see signal, they light as signal comes into them. I can tell when they're going into, if they're getting close to any sort of limiting mode, and I can tell what mode I'm in by the color of the button. The other buttons you can see here have to do with whether I have Wi-Fi connection, whether I have internet connection. We're all routed up and everything, but like I say, we've had great success with these. And aside from any time, the only time I really had to pull out the computer since we got out of the rehearsal room in these were when we wanted to add a speaker, and I had to reconfigure to make it the style we wanted. But we've got preset programs in here where we can click and drag and drop them and load them in a matter of less than a minute, and it's a piece of cake, and they've been a pleasure to work with. Okay, that's pretty much what we have and what we're using out here this year, and probably for the next couple of years here to come, as long as this tour runs out. And we've got 6 months down now. We're hoping to have a wonderful 2.5 years or so. Thank you to Powersoft for the wonderful amplifier. I'd like to thank Dave, the whole staff at Rat Sound, and for help working with me on making this all happen this way and actually presenting the gear to me for the first time. So with that, I'd like to maybe toss it back over to Dave, and we'll let him finish up.
Cool. Well, thanks for hanging out. I hope this webinar is interesting, informative. Thanks to Powersoft. I've been working with them. They've been absolutely wonderful in helping with this project and actually making some changes and developments to stuff that has been absolutely phenomenal. Great product. Thanks to Mario and Claudio and Luca and everybody at Powersoft, and yeah, 18 sound people. The development of the drivers. This is a fun project, and we're continuing to move ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to try and figure out this webinar thing. I might not be very good at it, so bear with me. Let's see. I see the question here. What made us decide to run Acoustics ARCs on the X4s? The reason we did that was we wanted to run everything on one type of amp. We wanted continuity. Normally, we wouldn't do that. We would want to have the Acoustics amps on driving the Acoustics ARCs. And we try not to ever make an exception. But for this application, with just the 4 ARCs on stage, 2 per side, and we decided, and they're not a critical component of the stage setup. We don't use the side fills. He doesn't use a lot of the side fills. So it was convenience, though not necessarily what we would do in other situations. Why do we use X4s instead of X8s? That has more to do with we're an early adopter, bringing in the X4 amps. We have some of the very first ones that were manufactured, and we wanted to make sure that they were reliable and that we could replace them. And having the X4s and being able to, if an amp was to go down, we wouldn't lose 8 channels, we'd just lose 4. And then over time, reliability is established, and you know, we can switch to the X8s. It doesn't really gain us much. It doesn't gain anything size-wise, but it improves, it reduces cost a bit. And there's some additional matrixing involved. So at some future point, we may go to X8s, but for us right now, the extra cost of the X4s is not an issue. Let's see, in the future, will you continue to run Dante for stage routing if your mixing board will support it? Probably not, but that's more of the monitor engineer's adventure there. Yeah, that would be more of a question for Mark. But having the control to be able to managed in routing it other ways. Have you encountered any application issues? You have a slow connection. Have you encountered any application issues when using the X series while on tour? No, not at this point. Just getting them set up, getting all the presets. Every X4 that we have has the presets for every other X4, so they're all preloaded. So any amp can replace any other amp, and then we have a spare as well. But we haven't had anything go down. In the very, very first initial ones, we were working out some little bugs there, but those are long gone, and none of them were significant. What kind of other designs were you considering while creating the SuperWedge? Right now, the two main projects are the SuperWedge and the 30-inch M-Force M-Drive sub that I'm working on that should be done soon. We have 16 to 20 of them coming out to the shop next month. Debut those in the US Chili Peppers tour. You'll hear more about that. I'm really excited. While on tour, did you know the initial settings and or routing of the amps were modified to match the musicians? Yeah, we kind of just built it as it went. Let's see, have I measured the SPL on stage? Not in a long time. They're not overly loud on stage, but stage volume is definitely something we're monitoring and trying to keep under control. They've got a great stage sound. When you go up on Chili Peppers stage with Jazz Plan, Flea, and Josh, you can stand right where Anthony is and it sounds absolutely amazing. Really, really clear. You can hear everything balanced. Exciting up there. SuperWedge and clarity. How was that achieved and maximized during the creation of SuperWedge preset? The fundamental is I use components. It's 18 sound components. The beryllium 4-inch diaphragm on that 10 is inherently amazingly clear. It just sounds, it goes very high in frequency response. It gets very loud and it sounds very low distortion. It's just a great sounding driver. So, and the same thing with all the components. We just started with great sounding components and then did a minor amount of tuning to it, but it's inherent in the selected speakers. Let's see what else we got that's interesting here. And then we'll redundancy involved in the routing chain. Not directly. I mean, we have a spare amp that has all the presets. So if something was to go down, they would fire up the app, switch it to the preset, and then just move the patches over and probably be running within, 30 seconds to a minute or something. Not very long downtime. Let's see what else we got. Did you have these at Rock on the Range in Columbus, Ohio back in May? I don't remember that far back, but I believe we did. Oh, yeah, I'm sure we did because we brought them into rehearsals and we rehearsed with initially, they were actually being built and finished as we were doing rehearsals. So we're kind of getting more and more as the rehearsals went on, but we've carried at least some of them since the beginning of this run, which was earlier this year. All right, let's get some more questions here. Are we using, I see one that's hasn't been given to me by the moderator yet, but I'll take it anyways. Are we using the custom FIRs? No, we are not at this point. Just very simple. They don't need a lot of internal EQ. One of the things that was very helpful was the limiter with the frequency dependent control on the sensing, on the input threshold, or however you want to look at it. The sense circuit has the EQ, so you can actually make the limiter more sensitive to certain frequencies than other frequencies. And that allowed us to get more a better sound out of the low end at high volume. So if you really push the wedge hard, instead of it getting thinner, which is typical, we're able to get it to maintain a very strong, punchy sound. Let's see what else. Are you powering in three-phase mode? That's a good question. They have the capability. The way the Rat Sound distros are set up is we can take in three-phase or single-phase inputs, and it just depends on which venue we're in. We're in Europe with Chili Peppers, and all of our Rat Sound monitor rig in front of house drive is built on a 120 volt three-phase setup. And we're carrying a large transformer, so they're dropping the 240 down to 120 three-phase, and then that powers all the backline, everything that we're carrying, including the rig. So yes, we are powering off three-phase. Are the presets for the LA cabs invented by you or your team? What are LA cabs? Acoustics cabs. They were in the amplifier. We just pulled them right up off the Powersoft library and used the Powersoft settings, and they came up. They came up well. We didn't really. I haven't really listened to them or compared them to the authentic Acoustics setup. I'm not. For us, for this application, we wanted the ARCs because they were low profile, and we had them in inventory, and we could lay them on their side, and they gave us the coverage. So the cabinet was doing what we want. But again, it wasn't a critical application of that box. There's other stuff we could have used that, but this one was better for it. Mainly, we just needed something that would power off this amp that didn't block sightlines to the side. Did you have these on Rock on the... Oh, I answered that one right. Did you... what else do we got? Let's get me some more questions here. I could talk about... I actually have two of them out. I have one of them out front that I use for a listening wedge. And I had two, but Mark took the other one when Josh wanted to swap out a wedge on stage. And that's kind of exciting. You get a pair of those fired up at front of house. It's actually kind of scary because it gets so much louder than the PA, and it's so clear. You don't want to turn them off, but it's easy to get lost in that. Did you test other cones before choosing 18 sound? Yes, I did. Testing cones is a kind of an ongoing process for me. It's not like I start from scratch. I'm always looking into new and exciting speaker technologies, and if something new that's out, I'll get some of them and put them in a box and listen to them. We did try some other manufacturers early on. The decision to go with 18 sound initially was their willingness to design a custom 4-inch voice coil, 10-inch speaker with a coaxial mounted 4-inch diaphragm driver behind it. That was the crux of the design of this wedge. that's the key component that, you know, a good pair of 12s support it, but the key component is that 4-inch, over 4-inch 10-2 coax. And I think that's really what makes it stand out. 18 Sound, I've been trying to get someone to build that for quite a few years now. Unsuccessfully, I've gone to several manufacturers, quite a few actually. And 18 Sound was the first one to say, yeah, we can do that. And then been taking some 12s out of their line, or they built me custom 12s, and we modified that, went through a couple versions. With the 12s are the easier part of the equation. Was Mark involved in stage development? To some degree, yes. I mean, the SuperWedges initially were inspired by discussions with Josh, actually with John at Rat, was to what can Rat do to build a wedge that is competitive or superior to anything else that's available on the market? What could get louder than a DMBM2? What could be clearer than anything else? If we could build the loudest, clearest wedge, what would it be? And we were talking about different formats and settled in on the double 12 10-2, the advantage of triamp, the advantages of coax, bringing that all together. In talking with Josh, we talked about putting the guitar speaker in the double 12 and having a single 12 swap out to a Celestion speaker, and either powering it off of a spare Marshall amp or powering it off an emulator, which is an idea that came up later. And then talking to, bringing that idea to Mark, asking him what he thought about it, and then his input towards the configuration. Mark is the one who came up with driving it off the emulator. Initially, and in the rack, there's a box that allows 1/4-inch cables to come off of a Marshall amp and inject and power those Celestion 12s from a tube amp. And he said, why don't we just try taking one of the guitar emulator out and running it full range into the mixing board and running that to the Celestion 12s. And it worked great. It way better than I would have imagined. And Josh came up and said it was the best that he's heard a guitar sound ever come from a wedge. So it's kind of a full circle adventure with many factors involved. Why is my front of house console rotated 90 degrees? I look at my job as a front of house engineer to connect the artist with the audience. I want to, in order to give the audience the most memorable experience possible. And in order to do that, I personally feel more comfortable being part of the audience. So by moving the console out from in front of me, I can kind of wander up to the barricade. I don't have a big piece of technology between me and the band or between me and the rest of the audience. I'm looking in at the back of people's heads instead of a glowing city of lights. And I can enjoy the show. My purpose is not the console and the outboard gear. Those are just the tools that I'm using in order to connect the artist with the audience. So making those front and center is more of a distraction than helpful to me. Maybe not unlike, I mean, when you're driving a car, I don't know, you've got all the speedometer and all the gauges, and they're, you don't want it too bright. You don't want your inside lights on. You want to focus on the road. It's all about the windshield and the road and navigating the car on the road. And then you want to be able to look down and not stare at the steering wheel, not stare at the speedometer the whole time. You want to look over it. You want to get past it. So if consoles were real small and out of the way and didn't have any lights on them, or they were very dim and no screens, maybe it'd be okay to have it in front of me. But yeah, it's really nice to have off to the side. in coaxial driver, is there a waveguide for the highs? Yes, there is. It's a 50 by 70 degree waveguide that is custom designed. Worked with Mario DiCola on the design for that, and then we had them 3D printed. These are still in the non-vinyl state, so we get them custom 3D printed for each wedge, and it's rotatable. You can have it 50 horizontal and 50 vertical, and that's actually another key component to the wedge. There's a big issue with coaxial drivers and horns. The horn forms, it gets in front of the cone speaker, and that in itself isn't that big of an issue if you don't run the cone speaker up to a really high frequency. But what is an issue is there's a chamber formed between, there's a space between the back of the horn and the front of the cone speaker, and that chamber causes all kinds of problems. It can resonate and cause a peak in the response. It's hard to deal with. It can cause some timing issues, and it just doesn't play well. So the waveguides that we're using, there's, I'm not really going to share what we did, but we were able to solve that in a way that I believe is probably the most effective solution I've seen. It's definitely the most effective solution I've seen to reducing the issues caused by a waveguide in front of a cone speaker. Did you let the musicians listen to different presets before choosing the final one, or was it done before presenting the wedge to them? We just I brought the wedges to rehearsals, helped them, made sure they all worked with Mark and Taka, who's his tech. And then Mark just went out there, listened to them. Mark listened to a couple different presets, said, this is the one I want. And then the band walked in, and I don't even know if they noticed the wedges switched for a few days. Josh definitely did, but the rest of them they just kind of wandered in, and everything sounds good, and they just kind of go about their way. And then after a little while, they say, oh, wait, this is new. But no, we don't really want the band to focus on presets and, hey, is this good? Is that good? We want them to focus on playing the show, playing their instruments. And if they're focused on the speaker, we're kind of distracting them. Really, they should just be able to walk in and rock. What kind of other designs were you considering while creating the SuperWedge? Oh, I answered that already. Other wedge designs, the progress of wedge designs for me started, it was the very first thing I ever built with a friend, Tom Hodder, in 1980, late 79 maybe. And it was a single 12 Gauss and supposed to be a JBL potato masher horn and a 1-inch driver, and immediately blew out the 1-inch drivers, and then couldn't afford to keep buying diaphragms. So we put some piezos in there. So the 12 and 2 piezos, had those for a while. And then went up, I kind of slowly mutated up into a 1510 1-inch, and then a 1510 2-inch, and then a double 1510 2-inch. And then those are the wedges Anthony's still using. Those happened about the late 80s, maybe 86, 87. We started making those. Then in the early 90s, started doing the coax stuff with the 12, 2, and 15, 2 micro wedges. First with Radian, then with EAW. And this was kind of the natural progression, as I said in the interview and the recording we watched, of taking those two concepts, the 15-10-2, which is all about breaking up the frequencies, being able to beat the crap out of the 15s with a kick drum, but still have the vocals super clear coming out of the 10-2 down the middle, and the 10-2 in the middle, not having any phasing issues. It's real smooth side to side, feedback stability. And then the micro wedge with the coax was all about getting into having a wedge where you could have like 3 wedges. You could put 2 wedges out and run stereo guitar into it, and put another third one in the middle and just run pure vocals, and or run kick drum into the outside 2s and beat those up, but have the vocals clear down the middle. So dividing differently by using multiple sources rather than one source with frequency dependent divisions. And then the SuperWedge is a design to kind of combine those two concepts. So you would use, it has the advantages of the double 15-10-2. Those 2 12s actually get louder than the 2 15s in our big wedge. And yet it's small enough horizontally, it's only 25 inches wide, to where you can also put 3 of them on somebody and have the division of separate sources as well. And then taking that source, the separate source thing even further by having these presets or configurations where you could run bass guitar full range into 2 of the 12s and beat those up, and then have the 10-2 as pure vocals and just have full range vocals like a little miniature micro wedge, or subs on an AUX, or having these other configurations. So it's about creating something that you can tailor to solve whatever you can even fire these things up as double 12 2-inch and turn the 10 off if you want a biamped wedge as another preset. How does the X4 allow the SuperWedge to function as a conventional triumph wedge? I'm not really sure what that means, but as a conventional triumph wedge, one of the settings, use input 1, and then output 1 goes to 112, output 2 goes to the second 12, output 3 goes to the 10, output 4 goes to the 2-inch. And the preset would be that the 212s see the same input signal, maybe at 40 to 200 or 250, I forget what it is, and then 250 to 900 or 1,000, 950 for the 10, and then 950 on out for the 2-inch. Input 2 can be set up to run just the 12s. Input 3 can be set up to run just the 10-2 in the middle, depending on the preset. Is the coax with a single or dual magnet? It is a dual magnet coax. We've looked at the single, and I actually tested some of the single magnet coaxes. This one's dual magnet, but it's not like a driver bolted on the back of a 10. It's dual magnet, yet it's a single piece. It's a single unit. One of the beauties of using the full 4-inch diaphragm 2-inch with the 2-inch throat is, unlike using a 1.5-inch throat, let me go back a little bit. By using the 4-inch, one of the issues is I want to use a 4-inch diaphragm 2-inch driver in order to get the extra output, and I really miss having that. All these new 3-inch diaphragm compression drivers, you can't run them as low, and they don't seem to have the clarity in the upper mids or the low that the larger format drivers do. But as soon as I got into the big 2-inch throat, being able to force that through a 3-inch 3-inch voice coil 10 is not going to work. There's not enough room there. So you had to go to the larger voice coil on the 10 in order to do that. One of the advantages of this is that it reduces the depth. If the other option would be use a 4-inch voice coil compression driver that then compresses down to 1.5 inches, and then it goes through the 3-inch voice coil 10. But then that would increase the depth, and as soon as you increase the depth, you also increase the time offset between the 2-inch and the 10-inch driver, and we wanted that time offset to be minimized. And also, if the 10-inch was deeper, it wouldn't fit in the box because it's very shallow. One of the things that's interesting about the SuperWedge is the 10-2 coax is actually at the bottom, not at the top. The 212s are at the top, and the 10-2 is all the way down at the floor in between the two ports, the port to the floor. And the reason for that is if a singer, well, first of all, it made the box smaller. It kept the shape that we were looking for, the trapezoidal angles. And a side advantage was that if a singer takes the mic and holds it down, points it straight down, then with the horn at the top of the wedge, it's more likely to feed back, whereas when it's at the bottom of the wedge, it maintains a bit more distance. Do the presets include any feedback suppression or flattening? I guess that's a question of whether I've pre-EQ'd. I did some pre-EQ in the micro wedges to account for, there's multiple colors in the micro wedges that would allow you to kind of pre-compensate for different mic types. I haven't done different preset colors for the SuperWedge at this point. We're still in the initial phase of first version presets. I can't hear you, Francesco.
Well, I think you covered a lot of topics. Don't know if there are any other questions.
I don't see any more here on my screen. I don't know. I think we did pretty good. Have you encountered any application issues while using the X4 series while on tour? Not really. I mean, it's been pretty straightforward. I have an X8 at front of house that I use for my playback wedges, and also it can work as a spare if we need to use it on stage. But no, we've been doing, I don't know, 50, 60 shows, 40, 50 shows, I'm guessing, and haven't really had any issues at all. All right, and I guess cheers from Amsterdam. I'm having a great time biking all over the place here.
Okay, I think you already covered a lot of questions, and all the unanswered questions can be filled later on, and we can provide them with answers by email.
Great.
I just wanted to say thank you again for your time, and I think it was pretty good, and we will provide the whole video interview via mail in a few days, because the one we watched before was the short version, and
okay.
So again, I don't think there are any other questions, so I think it's done. And thank you again. Thank you for being part of this webinar. And Dave, let's stay in touch. Thank you again, and have a good show in Amsterdam and Antwerp as well.
Perfect. And thank you very much. I covered a lot of topics that I haven't shared elsewhere, so this is kind of good.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.